Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, February 7th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 208 days, the game against Michigan in 292 days. Before we get into the subject of today's show, a quick note that the Ohio State men's tennis team swept both number 1 Tennessee and number 6 Virginia this weekend. Both of those matches were 4-0 or 4-love, as they say in the business. So that's a team to keep an eye on moving forward. The Ohio State men's hockey team swept a weekend series with Wisconsin, is now in first place in the Big Ten. Women's hockey team swept Minnesota State, ranked number 2 in the nation. Men's basketball team knocked off Maryland. They are improved to 7-3 in conference play, 14-5 overall. There are, however, places where things are maybe not going quite that well right now. One of those, I'm sure to the chagrin of the typical listener of this podcast, is Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the Michigan football program now has to replace both of its coordinators this offseason. I'm joined this morning by every Michigan fan's favorite Ohio State beat writer, Tony Gerdeman. Tony, how's it going?
It's going very, very well, Tom. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me on the show.
So let's talk a little bit about Josh Gattis. Josh Gattis left Michigan on Sunday morning to take the offensive coordinator position at Miami, the Miami Hurricanes, not the Miami Redhawks. This story, though, came basically out of nowhere. Pete Thamel had a report at 10:27 a.m. that Gattis was the Hurricanes' quote top target. That was the first report about any of this. That was up just long enough for me to quote tweet it and say, well, top target doesn't necessarily mean that he has interest. And then at 10:36 a.m., exactly 9 minutes later, Bruce Feldman reported that the deal was done. I was like, what? What? Already? How did that happen? So, we're going to do a little media criminology here. That is interesting to me because usually that first leak is to try and leverage a better deal out of the current job if you want to stay there. So the fact that the first leak came out and then it was 9 minutes later, boom, he's gone. That sure suggests to me that he just wanted out of Michigan and was not interested in trying to negotiate some other deal to stay there.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that nothing else broke before, during any of the talking with Mario Cristobal at Miami, because you would have to assume the talking didn't begin at 10:30 in the morning or whatever. Like, this had been going on, and for none of that to really get out there. And it sure seems clear that, and we will get into it, like just the way Gattis felt he was treated in all of this, and then Harbaugh's return. I don't know if Harbaugh's return is what did this in, because it sure sounds like I don't know that Josh Gattis was going to be back regardless, just based on how everything had gone down over the last month between Harbaugh, Michigan, Gattis, and Michigan. It's definitely a show worth talking about, which we're doing here.
Yeah, and there are some wild, wild rumors out there right now. We are not going to dive into those, but we can get into a report from Tom Van Haren, who is a very well-respected Michigan writer. He said that Gattis texted some current Michigan players, and here's the quote: "Unfortunately, the past few weeks has told a different story to me about the very little appreciation I have here from the administration. In life, I would never advise anyone to be where they are not wanted. ... So there are rumblings that, another assistant could be on his way out as well. That was something that Sam Webb, who's someone who's also pretty plugged in the Michigan Athletics Department, he's kind of floated that. It just seems like the vibe isn't great right now in the wake of Harbaugh's pursuit of that Minnesota Vikings job.
Well, and this tells me it wasn't great even aside from the Jim Harbaugh thing, because there are also rumors that if Harbaugh was going to, or not rumors, but there were thoughts that if Harbaugh did leave, that it was going to be Mike Hart instead of Josh Gattis who got the job. And I'm sure for Josh Gattis, that's probably something that he didn't appreciate. He was the Broyles Award winner this past season for the nation's top assistant coach, and he probably thought that would carry some cachet. I saw maybe it was Chris Vanini who tweeted out that only 2 times in history has the Broyles Award winner left the year following the year they won a Broyles Award. It was Josh Gattis and Gene Chizik, who left somewhere for Texas, Auburn for Texas, perhaps. Then eventually went back to Auburn as head coach. So it's something that doesn't normally happen, and it's a cause for concern. And then that text to me is that's not just leaving quietly. That's leaving and saying, hey, guys, if I were you, just, are you appreciated? If not, you should also leave. And you don't even have to go to Miami. I would just leave. Just go ahead and find some place better for you if you feel at all like you are not cared for. And and when your position coach is sending you this, it's like, well, is this my position coach caring for me by leaving, or not caring by leaving? Like does he care enough to say, hey guys, you should leave, or does he not care because he has left? And if he doesn't care and he's left, now you're like, well, maybe he's right because he doesn't care about me. So why should I care about Michigan? And there's just all of these different inner workings of just that text, the text to his players is just really, and I tweeted out a gif of the Joker from Batman blowing up the hospital. This is just on the way out, clicking the detonator and seeing what happens, because I would be shocked if this is the last thing that happens.
Well, and what I think has got to be most irritating to Michigan fans right now is you finally had a season where it was like everything went right, and it's like, okay, if we can just keep everything, nobody move, everybody stay exactly where you are, and we're going to try and run this back again, and it's just immediately like you said, everything's just sort of exploding everywhere, and you get both coordinators gone, and the Mike Macdonald one, I didn't really even raise an eyebrow at the Mike Macdonald one, because it's like, okay, you can go be an NFL defensive coordinator, and with the team you just came from a year ago, like that was fine. But yeah, this one was a little like something, and again, there's all sorts of rumors about what's really going on behind the scenes there, but it was just, there's a lot of turmoil there right now. And, the weirdest thing to me is last, Wednesday, Tuesday, you and I are recording a show about, there are credible sources in Ann Arbor reporting that Harbaugh to the Vikings is like all but done, and Gattis was listed as the betting favorite to get the head coaching job, and now 5 days later, Harbaugh's there, and Gattis is gone. And then I guess to me the bigger issue is they had an offense and a defense that were both working last fall. I mean, the offense was 16th in the nation in SP Plus after the Big Ten championship game. The defense was 7th, and now they got to start over again. And as we've seen firsthand with the Buckeyes, even if you get the first coordinator hire right, you don't always nail the replacement as well as you did with the guy who left.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And really, if you look at it, you've got now 2 members of this coaching staff who have left for lateral moves. Sean Nua, the defensive line coach, did it a month ago to go to USC. Josh Gattis has now done it to go to Miami. And now it's a situation where, like you said, you did pretty well. And I think we can discuss the impact of Josh Gattis leaving. I think the situation surrounding all of this is a bigger thing than actually what they'll be missing with Gattis. But it took some time for Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gattis to mesh. And that's another issue that the next offensive coordinator is going to have. And it sounds like it might be coming from in-house, so maybe that won't be so bad. But it's still a situation where, Don Brown did really well for a long time until he didn't. And Mike Macdonald did really well this year with 2 of the best defensive ends in the country and some decent secondary play. And now all of that is gone. So it's one of those things where, like, I don't know that Jeff Hafley would have been able to fix the defense for 2020's Ohio State team because of what they had and the issues they had. I don't know that Mike Macdonald would have been able to produce a 2020 Michigan or 2022 Michigan defense like he did in 2021. But still, now you've got a new guy bringing whatever he does in, and you don't know if it works until you see it on the field. And by that time, it's either too late or you got a little bit lucky.
Yeah, and the question now is what do they do next? And, on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, you sort of said the idea is they hire someone internally, probably. Andrew Anthony, the wide receiver, tweeted, quote, "OMG, our next move is crazy," all caps. Eyes emoji, handshake emoji, stay tuned. So that would suggest something, a little off the board. The internal candidate whose name's getting floated is Matt Weiss. He's the quarterback's coach. I guess the real question is, does this hire really matter all that much, or is this kind of just Jim Harbaugh's offense either way, where, if Kevin Wilson leaves at some point and it's still Ryan Day as the head coach, I don't know if the offensive coordinator position at Ohio State would have as much impact as, bringing in like Jim Knowles on the defensive side of the ball. So does this matter that much, or is this just kind of Jim Harbaugh's offense and then there's going to be a guy who has the offensive coordinator title?
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. I don't think it's a huge deal. And I'm still a little confused on how Josh Gattis actually won the Broyles Award. He came in with quite a bit of acclaim coming over from Alabama, and it seems like each year he's had a little bit of his uh, power taken away or influence taken away as the offense has gone more and more to what Jim Harbaugh wants to do because nothing else worked. And this finally worked this year, and I think it confirmed every suspicion that Jim Harbaugh's ever had about offense. And so now, it worked last year, so it finally worked. Exactly what I wanted. So they'll just go back to it. And I don't even know that it really matters. They're probably just going to go get a receivers coach to replace him, and then either some form of Sharon Moore as the co-offensive coordinator with Matt Weiss, or they'll maybe it's all a little bit of just moving around titles and things like that. And it would be interesting to see Matt Weiss as the offensive coordinator at Michigan. Remember, this is a guy who came over from Baltimore, who most of his career with John Harbaugh was spent on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And he had like 2 years assisting the quarterbacks back in like 2016 and 2017 before he had his first year as a full-time quarterbacks coach. So it would be an interesting move, but again, it's Jim Harbaugh's offense at this point. So it really, you could put a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and I don't know that it's going to be a huge issue one way or the other. They're still going to have to execute Jim Harbaugh's offense.
Yeah, and that's kind of what my thought is as well. The side of the ball opposite what the head coach's specialty is, I mean, that's obviously a much bigger hire than the side of the ball that the head coach specializes in. They don't have a defensive coordinator yet either, so that's going to be a big hire to watch as well. I think big picture wrapping up here, a year or two from now, you and I are sitting here on February 7th or whatever it is in 2024, and undoubtedly doing a podcast. Would Michigan, as we're talking about this, looking back 2 years in the future, would Michigan have been better with Jim Harbaugh leaving and a fresh start under head coach Josh Gattis, head coach Mike Hart, head coach Matt Campbell, whoever it is? Or are they better off the way that this thing has all played out? Because it feels like you're still maybe next year going to have a little bit of lingering, unless he signs a monster extension with a massive buyout. It feels like you're still going to have NFL questions. You're still going to have, okay, how does this next staff mesh? How does the staff after that mesh? It feels like, it's kind of crazy to say they might have been better off if he left and they really just had a fresh start with a guy who didn't have these kind of questions looming. But would they have been better off if he had just left?
I tend to think so because I go back to the fact that we know what Jim Harbaugh is, what the program is under him, and he has reached the peak for Michigan in my opinion. And so, can somebody else do better? I don't know, but is it one of those things where you pay the price to find out? Now, I don't know if Josh Gattis and Mike Hart could have been the guy, but it feels like they're going to be a neutral for a while until maybe they either decide to put it in park or reverse. Now, perhaps the deceptive thing is their schedule is pretty manageable next year.
Mm-hmm.
So they could be a program in neutral and still come to Ohio State with a 9-2, 10-1 record just based on the fact that they've got a pretty decent slate and a manageable schedule to play through. But is that just is that just a little bit of polish on an old beat up car or something like that? Or because I think their record will be better than what the program is next year, unless of course they end up being exactly what they are and they lose games they shouldn't, and then it becomes apparent that they should have gotten rid of him. But I tend to think going with any of the guys that we discussed on a Buckeye Weekly episode last week, where the upside is there for anybody over Jim Harbaugh, almost like the top candidates. I think in 2 years, yeah, they'd been better off to go with somebody else because we've seen what 6 years of Jim Harbaugh gets you now, 7 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah, and this is going to be an interesting year for them because you've got, it feels like this is almost a 2-game season because their non-conference schedule is just absolute garbage this year. It's UConn and Colorado State and Hawaii, I think. I think it's three not very good non-power teams, all of whom are replacing their head coaches. So it is a kind of a dumpster fire of a non-conference schedule. So that's 3 easy wins. But it feels like that season, like if you tell Michigan fans, here's what happened against Michigan State and here's what happened against Ohio State, that's all anyone's going to care about at the end of the year. It's going to be like, if they were 10-2 but they lost those 2 games, I don't know how that's going to get graded out in Michigan fans' eyes, especially if one or more of those games is not a competitive game. So that'll be interesting to watch. We'll have plenty of time to sort that all out and find out what's going on with both of those coordinator hires and all that kind of stuff. It is going to be. There's a lot to talk about around the Ohio State program, but Ohio State fans, as Tony Newells knows from years and years of doing the Michigan Monday column, Ohio State fans are always interested in hearing what's going on with Michigan as well. So there'll be plenty to talk about with the Wolverines in addition to the Buckeyes. So you can hear us talking about all of that stuff on all of our great podcasts. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you find podcasts. You can find our podcast. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. Tony and I do Buckeye Weekly. Kevin Noon does the Big Me Kickoff. Alex Gleitman does Around the Oval. Mark Givler and Bill Green do the Gives in the Bank. All great content focusing on different areas of the Ohio State football program and college football recruiting on the whole. And if you like those and you want to watch them on YouTube instead, you can just go to youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. They're all there on that YouTube channel as well, along with some other fun stuff, interviews and camp highlights and all that kind of stuff. It's all at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Hit that bell, subscribe to that channel. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button as well. That will help other folks find these shows. That is something that we do really appreciate when you guys can help us out and do that. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.